Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to the podcast and welcome to this episode. In this episode, I will be sharing with you some of my contemplations for the week ahead, the things that I'm seeing on an energetic level, as well as the astrology. And as always, I welcome you to sink into yourself, however that feels good to you, to give yourself a chance to ground back into your body and to feel into what messages really want to come through for you here, because what I'm sharing is really from the perspective of me as a human being, in conversation with, in communion with my guides, the cosmic body, with the Akashic field, with my sacred ancestors. And so some of this information may actually inspire something else within you that is more important for you to pay attention to. So turn your gaze inward as you're listening to this. And also, if you found this episode outside of time, meaning outside of the week of February 6, 2023 to February 12, 2023, although I do talk about the astrology, I really get to the heart of it more in these episodes. So I welcome you to stay here if you feel that would be resonant, because maybe there's something here for you. All right, so let's begin with feeling into the astrology of the coming week. And the first thing I will say is, before I even talk about the astrology of the week, it is important to contextualize the astrology of this week as, standing in contrast, or as really the aftermath of the astrology of last week, right? So last week, what we were experiencing was there was a Sun-Uranus square. The Sun was in Aquarius, Uranus was in Taurus, and still is, actually. And then there's also a Venus-Mars square, right? So Venus in Pisces, Mars in Gemini. And what is happening this week is that those squares are beginning to ease off, right? In the technical language of astrology, they're beginning to separate. And so we may really feel that. And then on Monday, February 6th, Mercury in Capricorn is going to be creating a sextile to Neptune in Pisces. On Wednesday, the 8th, Venus in Pisces will be creating a sextile to Uranus in Taurus. And then on Friday, the 10th, Mercury in Capricorn is going to be conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. And then on Saturday, Mercury is going to leave the realm of Capricorn to enter Aquarius. And so overall, to me, the energy of this week feels a lot more spacious than last week. There's more of an energy of openness. There's, I think, an opportunity for us to reflect on everything that's been going on, to synthesize, to digest, and also to make space for a little bit of extra ease for this coming week. I kind of want to jump in. So let's talk about the questions that I would like to share with all of you to contemplate for the coming week. And I have two questions. The first question is, where in my life does slowing down feel nutritive, caring, and regenerative? Where in my life does slowing down feel nutritive, caring, and regenerative? And then the second question is, where in my life am I being called to finding sweetness by making sweetness? Where in my life am I being called to finding sweetness by making sweetness? So I'm going to talk all about them right now. So get ready, get cozy. So let's talk about the first question, right? This idea of where is it nutritive? Where is it regenerative for you to be slowing down? As I mentioned, this week feels a lot more easeful for me. And I think also within this ease, there's something that we can do in order to fortify the tools that we will need for the changes that are coming up ahead. If you have been listening to astrologers talk about the astrology of 2023, you will know that there are a lot of seismic changes here. There's a podcast conversation that I had with Diana Rose Harper on this podcast, which I'm also going to link below, where we talk about the astrology of 2023 and we dive really deep into that, so you can check that out. But one of the changes that are coming up ahead is Saturn is going to be moving from Aquarius into Pisces. And this is quite seismic because since 2017, Saturn has been in Capricorn and then in Aquarius, right? And both signs are traditionally ruled by Saturn. So this is going to be the first time in about 6 years where Saturn is going to be in a sign that it doesn't rule. And so there's something really powerful here, I think, around really taking responsibility to building out our dreams, right? Into having practices that are supportive to essentially allow ourselves to be these agents, right? These liminal agents that move between the dream realm into what we call our reality, right? And to continue to do the work that is necessary in order to start translating some of your visions from your dream world into your reality. And so I think that this week is providing an opportunity to process, to slow down, to digest, because in the process of slowing down and digesting, we give our minds the ability to start getting the rest that it needs in order for the dream world to start coming in, right? Dreaming is not a passive act. Dreaming is a really active thing, and dreaming takes a lot of energy. And so in order for us to dream, sometimes we have to retrain the brain a little bit, right? Something that I've been hearing a lot from my friends, from my students, from the people that I see in readings is the difficulty of living in a world that feels so fast-paced, right? And I want to talk a little bit more about this because I've had an experience this past week that is really interesting around that. In terms of me really beginning to care for my mental realm, I've realized that the practice of reading a book has been really helpful for me. So let me talk a little bit more about this because I want to qualify it and I kind of want to give you all the juice here. And I promise I have a point. So, I have always been someone who loved reading, but as I have gotten older, and I suspect this is the case for a lot of us living in this digital age, reading a book from start to finish has been more and more difficult. I remember in my high school years, during summer breaks, I grew up in the 90s, so this was like early 2000s-ish. I would take the 3 months off that I have, right? And I would just start voraciously reading all the books that I bought in that year, right? And I would just roll from one book to another, and then the days roll into one, and it's this glorious orgy of reading. reading nonstop, right? And I think reading is so powerful because what I didn't realize until I started picking reading books back up is that the process of reading to the end of sentences and then to the end of paragraphs and then to the end of chapters is really nourishing, right? And I think it's a bit of a lost art for us, reading especially as someone who is a little bit more on the auditory side, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I have a lot of different conversations with people. I think this is kind of where I can feel like I can jam, and it's more fun, and all of my senses are awakened, right? Whereas I think with reading, you have to begin turning your attention inwards, and you have to slow down a little bit, right? But what I'm learning from picking reading back up is that reading actually really helps me come home to myself. So the book that I'm recently reading is called Stolen Focus: Why You Can't Pay Attention Anymore. And I believe the author's name is Johann Hari, although I may be mispronouncing that, so I apologize if that's the case. I am going to link that in the show notes below. What I love about this book is that it kind of paints a narrative of the web of all the interconnected, interrelated reasons on why our ability to pay attention has been diminishing on a steady decline, right? And maybe even an accelerated decline in the past few years. It's not really a how-to book, which I really appreciate, because it really takes the time to present this deeper dive into facets of our current collective experience that helps illuminate this gnawing feeling that a lot of us are living with around not being able to tap into that flow anymore that our brains get into when we're reading or when we are playing music, right? But rather we are living. So this is an anecdote that I'm picking from the book, and I'm kind of intentionally taking it out of the context, right, to illustrate a point, which is that in the book, Johann talked about how we live under the delusion and illusion of being able to multitask, when actually our brains are really priming us to be beings that are only capable of monotasking, right? We're only really able to focus on one thing at a time. And this is rather unintuitive, but how the author explains it is that what we're doing when we're so-called multitasking is that we're actually switching between one task and another. And in order to switch, we really need to be expending more energy and more brain activity than if we were to simply allow ourselves to stick with one task, right? And to continue to deepen with whatever task it is that we're doing. And something that I've been realizing is very powerful as a way to really care for myself is to give myself permission to start the day with reading. Because when I start the day with reading, and I can't remember who told me about this, but a friend of mine was telling me that they started the day with reading and how that was really incredible to me. So if this was one of you listening, I apologize. I can't remember who you are, but this has been really powerful for me because giving myself permission to read in the morning has helped me kind of deepen into a way of being, a way of formulating and interacting with my thoughts that is much more calm. And in so doing, I'm able to not feel like I have to do a million things at once. I'm more able to have the ability to kind of say, I'm currently focusing on this thing, so I'm not going to switch to the other task. Really recognizing the switching as a switch rather than as two things you are doing simultaneously has been really helpful for me to understand. And I believe that caring for my mental processes in this way, caring for my Mercury in this way is powerful because, as I mentioned before, it's starting to give me a little bit of an openness. I mean, first of all, it's really good for my nervous system to start to become aware of the ways that I am switching between one task and another, and then whipping myself into this frenzy because I'm not really able to get into that flow state that I so crave and desire. And also that in giving myself permission to just do one thing and to kind of be in this reading space and approaching my life from that space, I'm noticing that in some ways, I actually get things done a lot quicker. Not that efficiency is the be all and all, but I think there's something really profound here, and I'm going to ground it a little bit in astrology because thinking about Mercury in Capricorn, right? To me, Mercury in Capricorn, Capricorn is an earth sign. It is ruled by Saturn. So there's an awareness of the power and the potency that is inherent in our mental processes, and also perhaps our responsibility in taking care of that. There's an awareness that with Capricorn, we need to prime ourselves to be able to do the best work that we can, right? And I think thinking about the astrology of 2023, realizing our dream world is going to be a very important part of this, 2023, and our journeys in 2023. There's an idea that Mercury is kind of this quicksilver figure, right? That Mercury is either untrustworthy, or it's a trickster whose motives are unclear, whose intentions are questionable. But when we reflect on the essential dignity scheme, I think things get a little interesting, right? Because guess which sign is Mercury in domicile and exalted in? It's Virgo, Mercury is exalted and in domicile in Virgo, which is an earth sign. And, the energy of Virgo to me has so much to do with being fastidious, with being devoted, with being in service to a greater cause, a greater power. There's something about Virgo that is about synthesizing and being congruent, right, in the ways that we are tapping into resources. Virgo is anything but careless, right? Virgo has an intentionality and even sometimes a single-mindedness to it. And so knowing that Mercury actually does well, right, in the land of Virgo that requires discipline, that requires focus, I think is really powerful. And to me, it's kind of perspective shifting a little bit, because there's a part of me that kind of thinks, oh, Mercury likes to just kind of flit about, right? And maybe this is speaking to my Mercury in detriment and fallen in Pisces, certainly does well in nonlinear spaces. But I think giving myself more of a permission to, in a way, gently and compassionately train my Mercury so that my Mercury knows, when am I working? When am I resting, right? And really making space for that rest in order for dreams to come through feels very powerful. So also, as I mentioned, Mercury is kind of having a brush up against Neptune and also Pluto, which are both outer planets. So another resource that I would recommend you to listen to if you feel like diving deeper into the relationship between Mercury and the outer planets is my conversation with Verena Borrell, also on this podcast, about the Mercury's relationship to the outer planets. And I'm going to link that in the show notes as well. Okay, so let me then transition into the other question for contemplation that I would like to share, which is, where in my life am I being called to finding sweetness by making sweetness? This was actually the first one that came up for me when I felt into the coming week. There's something about this week that feels to me like it's oriented towards making sweetness and then sitting in the spaciousness of experiencing that sweetness. Now, the kind of sweetness that I'm talking about is one that makes you feel safe, that makes you feel cared for, makes you feel seen and at ease, right? I'm realizing as I'm sitting down to feel into this contemplation that sweetness is kind of hard to talk about. Because for many of us, especially those living in the US, we kind of have a weird relationship to sweetness. And as I'm contemplating the idea of sweetness, I'm realizing I don't have the right words for it. So I'm going to try anyway. And I think you're going to get to see what I mean by sweetness here. But I really want to take the time to define it a little bit more. Something I realized when I was contemplating on my own relationship with sweetness is that I have learned through my lived experience and the messages that I receive from the collective to be suspicious of sweetness, right? And oftentimes this is actually called for, because let's look at it from a few different perspectives, right? From a very physical, even maybe somatic perspective, very tangible perspective. A lot of us grow up with sugar alternatives that are not necessarily the best for us, right? And for example, things like cane sugar, which are cost-cutting alternatives, right? But we don't have a relationship with sources of sweetness that are truly nutritive for us, right? Even just thinking about one of my favorite restaurants whenever I'm traveling across the United States is actually IHOP. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that, but I like getting the pancakes at IHOP, and whenever you pour that honey, right, that is not real honey, my friends. That is not real honey, right? That is some really messed up version of honey. I don't even know what's on it, but it's not real honey, right? And so a lot of us, our exposure to sweetness is through kind of fake or not so nutritive, not so nourishing forms of sweetness. And so this is sweetness that are manufactured or engineered to be addictive rather than nutritive, right? So that's one aspect of this experience of sweetness, on maybe more of a physical level. And then on a more social level, many people are wary of sweetness because often, I've certainly experienced this, where sweetness is being used as a tool of manipulation, where people are sweet to us because they want us to do something for them. And so you get my vibe here, right? Sweetness can be hard to trust. Sweetness can be difficult to really discern, around like what is genuine sweetness, what is nourishing sweetness versus what is sweetness that is coming from manipulation or fawning, right? So what I want to ground us into is that there is a kind of sweetness that is inherent to life, right? And I'm really thinking about this with regards to Venus in Pisces. Venus exalts in Pisces, right? And so there's something about Venus in Pisces that is very sweet, that is very, in a way, connected to a more naive part, a more innocent part of us that is really embracing the loveliness, of what it means to be human and what it means to be in this plane of existence, right? I'm thinking about that moment when you listen to a song and you feel comforted and seen, right? Maybe not in any sort of big, profound way, but in a way that feels like similar to getting into your favorite sweater and feeling really cozy. I experienced this the other day. I was out and about, and suddenly, in the food court that I was, this music came through that I used to listen to, this album, many years ago when I was moving through some pretty difficult moments. And, it really felt so comforting and so sweet. And I was able to momentarily get back in touch with an older part of myself, right? If any of you are into tarot, the kind of sweetness that I'm talking about here is like Six of Cups kind of sweetness, right? Maybe there's like a little bit of a nostalgia, but there's a feeling of being safe within that sweetness. To me, making sweetness has a lot to do with practicing a certain way of being where you're not afraid of being at ease, right? Where you're not afraid of sharing, of expressing the admiration, the wonder that you feel about yourself and about other people and about the world around you, right? While also knowing that nothing is being expected of you, right? That your sweetness is not going to be taken out of context and then used against you at some point. And people are not trying to manipulate you with their sweetness, right? In a sense, I suppose when I'm talking about sweetness, culturally, I see this a lot with people relating to their beloved pets or their beloved houseplants, right? There's something about pets and plants that make it easier for us to just kind of come into their space, come into their force field, and not just co-regulate with them, but really be in their field of acceptance and isness, right? Like that dimension of just being alive and being, in a state of wonder of being alive and not really stopping ourselves from being alive. I think there's really something powerful about the lack of restraint that comes from the heart blossoming open and spontaneously expressing a desire to connect, which really stands in contrast. And I think a lot of us can really feel this energetically, right? Against a lack of restraint that we see a lot of examples of, which is coming from the urgency of maybe winning the attention of the beloved, out of fear of feeling unworthy or feeling like, unless we share our love, the person is going to run away, right? And so sweetness to me is transient, right? And this is actually a good news. It's not supposed to last. There's something about sweetness that is fleeting, and that fleetingness shouldn't be interpreted as a lack of trustworthiness or a lack of dependability, but rather actually a sign of grace, right? There's something about the transience of sweetness, genuine sweetness that we experience in life that actually is very nutritive. That part of the nutrition of that sweetness comes from the fact that it doesn't last forever. So recently, there was a houseplant that my partner and I received as a gift, which is a Christmas cactus. And a few weeks ago, it began to bloom, which was a complete surprise to me because I didn't even know what the name of this plant is. Honestly, it came into my life and our lives without us seeking it. And so I was just watering it intuitively. I didn't even bother looking up the name on the internet or using my plant app, which I do have. I just kind of didn't really expect it to survive, right? I was like, whatever, let it do its thing. So I was really surprised when it ended up blooming. When it began blooming, my mind was completely blown. I kind of went bananas, right? I became this doting plant grandparent, and then I started singing to it. I started taking pictures with it. I was just so overjoyed. And then in a couple weeks, the flower kind of closed back down, and then it began wilting, and it finally fell off, right? And that's it. The plant went from being this, kind of crowning attention nexus of the home back into this chill, rather non-impressive houseplant. And so to me, this is teaching us something really profound about sweetness, right? That sweetness inspires a certain kind of reaction that can feel over the top. But because of its transience, right, we can rest assured that genuine sweetness will let us off the hook. And this might sound weird, right? Because we live in a society where like more is more, right? Like we just want more and more and more of the things that we like. But the fact that sweetness is transient, to me, is really at the heart of how we're able to enjoy sweetness, right? That it's something that comes into our lives. We can feel really gratitude. We can feel this deep gratitude towards that sweetness. We can feel this deep nourishment from that sweetness, and then that sweetness passes away, right? So how can we trust ourselves and the world around us enough so that we can express the sweetness or receive the sweetness without feeling a lot of the ickiness that can come with that, right? To me, this is both individual and communal work, right? Because on an individual level, it is about expanding our ability to respond in a way that can inspire or that can facilitate mutual sweetness to come through, right? When we come from a space of trusting in our intention and the intention of others, we create intimacy. And we create a sense of security, a sense that we can be held, we can be seen, celebrated in our essence. And that to me is really the foundation from which true, genuine sweetness can come forward, right? So what does this look like for you? How can you give yourself more space, especially during a week like this where not a lot of insane astro things are happening, to give yourself permission to experience and to draw from the nectar of life, right? Relationally, what's coming forward for me is to notice who in your circle of friends are allowing you to express the sweetness, right? And the kind of sweetness that I'm talking about is not the kind of sweetness where you feel obliged, right? Because I think there can be something that feels really exhausting when you have to perform sweetness. But rather, who are the people who are so genuine, who are so uplifting, maybe, where the relationship is so easeful to the point where you don't even notice it. You don't even notice that they are supporting you because they make it so easy. Who are these people, right? Hold them dear, check in with them, spend a little bit of time with them, because that sweetness is something you can facilitate, something you can generate, something you can co-create. And it will blossom forth when the time is right. So I also pulled a couple cards for us, and I love doing these card pulls at the end of my contemplations because to me, they really help me clarify a little bit more about some of the messages that I was receiving and feeling into. So the cards that I pulled are Three of Swords from the She-Wolf Tarot, as well as the card labeled Who's There from Begin Oracle. So I'm going to share both of the cards as a picture in the link below in the show notes in case you want to check it out. To me, the combination of these two cards is really a reminder that everyone is working with a wounded inner child somewhere within them, right? Everyone works with some sort of voice that is telling them that they don't belong or they're not good enough, right? And so tapping into sweetness, tapping into ease, tapping into kindness can be really potent when you're interacting with and holding space for another person, because you just don't know what their internal monologue is like, right? Similarly, if you are practicing being sweet, if you're practicing giving yourself a lot of ease, you might find that you get into situations where your own fears and your own maybe past hurt or past trauma, shall we say, is kind of reflected back at you. And I want to be very clear that there's actually nothing wrong with you if that's happening, right? So if you have been, if you're telling me, wow, Jonathan, I have been making more space to do the things that I love doing, maybe, even more space to meditate or like to create ease in my life, and yet I am actually feeling kind of worse. My inner critic is even more activated. This is what I will tell you. It's easy to go into that mental place where you start to make meaning out of this experience you're having, which is that all the work you're doing is not working, right? Or you're kind of back to square one. But I want to affirm to you that that's not true. Sometimes, and this is why I think it's not true, because sometimes the parts of us that are the most tender and the most afraid come out precisely when we're being gentle. When we walk around the world trying to assert our confidence, trying to exude power, we're not always aware of these parts of us that are more afraid, right? Because they actually don't have the space to talk to us. It's kind of like, how sometimes, this is certainly an experience that I've had, we can be a little bit more truthful about our resistance to maybe learning, to our resistance about the material, with teachers who are very gentle and with teachers who are very understanding of the resistance we experience on a human level, right? Versus the teachers who are very stern and the teachers who are like my way or the highway, right? So in a way, the parts of us that are more afraid, that are more maybe have been repressed for a while can come out when we give ourselves the space to listen, right? And to practice ease, because as ease starts to happen, all the stuff starts to come up because they want to be witnessed and they want to be maybe cleared or they want to be transmuted. They're kind of like things that you've been shoving all around your house and you never saw them because you've been busy. And then the moment you're done with whatever it is that you're busy with, you start realizing, wow, I have all this stuff in my home, True story for me. So if that's what's coming up for you, just know that you're totally on the right track and that you are exactly where you need to be, and to not get down on yourself when these feelings come up, or when you see other people having reactions that you're like, but I'm being so nice. Why are you being like this? Often that's what happens. When we hold space for all of us, all parts of us. So that is it for my contemplation for the coming week. I am so grateful for you listening, for you taking the time. I hope that you took away something from it that is useful for you, that is nutritive as points of contemplation. As always, I would love it if you could share this episode with anybody you think will benefit from it. I always love and appreciate receiving a review. I've received so many beautiful reviews from all of you listening, and I am so, so grateful, and know that these reviews are so helpful in getting the podcast out there, in encouraging other people to listen to it. And if you feel like writing a review, it really doesn't have to be very long. It can be, 2 to 3 sentences are definitely enough. More is always welcome and appreciated, but know that it doesn't have to be this masterpiece. It's not Tolstoy, it's just a review for my podcast. Jokes, but yes, not really joking either. And also, I want to share that my books are open for February. So if anything that I shared in the podcast here feels like something you want to deepen into, or you would like someone to hold space for you in your process, reach out to me and I would love to do a reading with you. I would love to work with you one-on-one. Doing one-on-one work has always been such a joy and an honor and feels like home to me. So I would absolutely love and welcome you in that space. All right. I, again, am so grateful for your time, for your attention, for listening to this podcast. I can't wait to see you again. And until then, I am sending you so much love, and I hope you take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for listening.